Thank you so much for that. Now, it is a beautiful day, and thank you for the invitation to be here and to share with you a journey, which is the goal of today is a journey from an evolutionist to a creationist, how as an academic and as a scientist for most of my life, and a non-Christian, how did science bring me to God? Because that's not what you hear in the media, is it? You hear in the story in the media that no scientist can become a Christian, or if they do, they are very silly, idiotic type people. Well, I can assure you, many scientists have given their life to Christ, more so today than perhaps ever before, because science, as I'll show you with one little example, a fun example today, is increasingly pointing to the Bible as being true and correct, historical, and the foundation of all that we believe in. And so I want to share with you that journey, evolutionist to creationist, and you'll see there, yes, I do have some qualifications. I'm not a doctor as in those who call themselves doctors but aren't really doctors because they're medical practitioners. I'm actually a doctor with a doctor of philosophy. That's a bit of a joke within the industry. They're medical practitioners, they're not doctors. And PhD from the University of New England, travel around the world as you'll hear and see. I'm still apparently an adjunct professor at Turun yliopisto, which is Turku University in Finland, where it says on the website, not often on campus because I haven't been there for 20 years. But so I'd love to share with you that journey and highlight a little bit of science, which is quite revolutionary, quite new, and really is impacting upon scientists around the world. So let's see if I can work all this now. Put that on, it should be on. No, I must have done it the other way. Let's try that. Try it again. There we go. Whoa, too far. Go back. Okay. Now, people interpret me as a scientist, and therefore you interpret me sort of like that, don't you? Now, I noticed in that photograph that you put up, I had darker coloured hair on top. It is not that anymore. It has gone grey, just like it has there, and it will slowly start to curl. So I'm going to look like that in the future. It's not a photo of me in the past, it's a photo of me in the future. But I was not, in a sense, a laboratory scientist, chemistry and all those sorts of things, and so on. What I was a person who studied landscapes. I studied floods. Isn't that interesting? You chase floods wherever you can go. Studied sediments, and that's the big word today, sediments. Sediments is dirt on the move. When dirt gets washed off your backyard into the river channel, you might call it dirt, I'll call it sediment just to be technical, okay? So sediment is dirt on the move, and also did a little bit of work on fossils as well, and that's what I'm going to share with you today actually, a little bit of fun with fossils. And at midlife crisis, I had a midlife crisis and became a microbiologist for a short period of time, but then realised I needed to be back out there again, and so I took off back out into the field again. Where did I travel over this entire period? I travelled the world. Study floods and landscapes. I was essentially asking the question, how do current processes, rainfall, wind, erosion, how do they create the landscape we live in? Why is that hill there? Why is that river channel there? Why does the river flow like this? But I was interpreting it on today's processes, not what happened in the past. And that's called uniformitarianism. It's a big word, but it means we look at the past using today as our guideline. And so I was trying to understand how the Great Dividing Range would be there, how these mega valleys like Katoomba would be there and so on. But I spent 10 years living in China, and that was all good fun. Had to learn to speak Cantonese, which I do. Most of it's forgotten now, but there's still a little bit of Xiu Xiu Guan Bang Hua. I lived for a couple of years in Finland as well, learned to speak Finnish, basically, although I've got to relearn a lot of that again. I worked for the Gaddafi government in Libya, and look at the looks I'm getting. Oh, no, not like that, ladies and gentlemen. I was actually working on sustainability, water supply, and those sorts of things. And the media does present many governments in the wrong way. Whilst I was there was a Jewish synagogue in operation and many Christian churches in Tripoli. Isn't that interesting? Not today, after the Civil War, but before that, under Gaddafi, freedom for religion was wide open. I worked in Peru as well, loved that. Worked in the Amazon jungle, looking at the Amazon River and the Huallaga River. That was all good fun as well. I enjoyed swimming in the Amazon. That was exciting. Why are you looking at me again like that? What's the word you're thinking of? Piranhas. You're watching too much television. The piranha in the Amazon does not eat you. They actually have surf life-saving flags up. You can go swimming in there. Seriously, it's the Congo. In the Congo, the piranha will eat you. So it didn't eat me. I ate it, and it is a beautiful fish, I can assure you, in a Peruvian sauce. So I loved that in Peru and so on. Pacific Islands, South Africa, all of those things. Loved all of it. Now, why did I go on that journey? Why did I want to become a person out there, alone, studying these things in the most remarkable and most remote places on the planet? Well, the answer is quite simple. I was raised in a dysfunctional family, one of violence, one of alcoholism. Going to school was no different. In high school, I became the victim of a teacher. So by the time of 18, I did not understand what love was, what a relationship was. I didn't know how to communicate to people. And so what did I do? I sought an education, a higher education, in order to free myself not only of the family, because it was non-Christian, not only of the family, but also of the city I lived in, also of this country. I was actually, in those days, there was no support systems in place, so I took off overseas. And I thoroughly enjoyed travelling the world. And what I was doing was I was trying to embed myself in their culture. So when I went to China, I didn't go to the Australian bars and mix with Aussies. I actually mixed with the Chinese and learnt Cantonese. And for that reason, they identified me as someone who was trying to connect with, not be arrogant with, the Chinese. And so they funded me the largest, most expensive particle sizing laboratory in Asia at the time, because they were rewarding me for trying to blend into their culture as opposed to being an expatriate on a high income. And so I loved all of that. And in Finland, yes, that was all good fun too, in there as well. It was interesting that my ability to communicate was very clear and pointed out by a pastor in Finland that I couldn't communicate. Now, Finnish men are very stoic. They are rare speakers. They rarely speak. And I was sitting in a sauna one day, and a Finnish pastor said to me, Ron, because they roll their R's. And it's very, very stoic, almost Russian accent to it. Ron, you are a good Finnish man. I said, I'm a good Finnish man, Pastor. Why am I a good Finnish man? Because, Ron, we have sat here for 1 hour and you have said nothing. That's true in Finland. So if you're a young lady and you ever go over to Finland, understand this. If a Finnish man ever says to you, I love you, understand this. That's the one and only time you're ever going to hear it in your relationship with him. That has been documented in a CNN documentary in the States. And they asked the particular Finnish gentleman, well, what happens if you don't love her? Well, if I don't love her, I will tell her I don't love her. They're blunt and to the point, and I love that as a culture, given my ability to communicate. So all of that journey was just incredible for me to grow up. Did I seek to be the best? I did. Why? Because I wanted to rise the ranks, I wanted security in my life, and that meant financial security, it meant job security, it meant all of those sort of things. Was it an interesting journey? Yes. Have I been shot at? Yes. Arrested by foreign governments? House arrested? Yes. Have I been drugged and robbed? Yes. Wasn't there attempted kidnapping where I had to leap from a vehicle? Yes. I loved it. Because it was exciting and I could control this. You know, did I catch every disease possible? Yes. You all complain about COVID. I caught it 10 years ahead of you in China. It was roaming China for a long, long time beforehand, I'm sure of it. And so I really don't suffer from those things anymore and didn't come down with it because I'm sure I had it 5 times in China, decades earlier. And so in Peru, we had one of our people lose half their neck from leprosy. We unfortunately had one of our female research scientists, she was gunned down in the streets. So we did suffer casualties, it was rough. But I loved growing up, taking responsibility and learning how to communicate. By learning to connect with other cultures, I learned how to reconnect back here. Does it make sense? Yes, so that was my journey as I travelled around the world. Now before I get into the fascinating little story of fossils, it was one of the points that helped me. I could give you 5 different lectures here on 5 different topics that all of them help point me to God. Before I do, let's get the paperwork out of the way. I am with Creation Ministries International. The red circle there goes around our search engine. You might be surprised to know that we have 15,000 articles for you to read. If you want to copy them, copy them. If you're a student and want to plagiarise us in your assignments, go ahead. We are not going to challenge you for using our material. Copy it, give it away, it's all free. We want it used. So do not type the word flood in that search engine, you'll get 2,000 articles, okay? Make sure you put down flood, how, why, when. We do a lot of theological work as well. And the site is called creation.com. Make sense? What's it called? Excellent, excellent. Many churches I go to go, creation.com. Okay, now that as an academic, I'm going to give that a credit rating, not a pass, failure, borderline. I'm going to give it a credit rating. I'm going to ask you once again to see if you want to raise your mark. What's that site called, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, I'll give it a distinction. It's close. I wanted passion. I want energy. You know, creation.com. You got to go to it. It's incredible with its wealth of knowledge written by top scientists all around the world. I thought I'd be one of them, but I'm a junior one. I can assure you, our scientists work with us are incredible. Now that's 40 years of records there. But more importantly, what we have is we have what's called an infobite. That's just a pretty picture there. An infobite is something you can receive every 2 weeks by email, which is an up-to-date statement on something that's just happened out there. It doesn't have to be science. It might be a movie that's released, like Jurassic Park. But we'll tell you what it really means and how they got it wrong. The Velociraptor is not this big. Velociraptor is actually that big. It's a duck with claws. But Hollywood loved that name, so they made it this big, intelligent, and, you know, chatty to you. You know, that's not the way it works, but they love the name. We'll tell you what's right and what's wrong. If politicians or scientists go on strike, we'll talk about that as well. From all around the world, we give them out freely to you every 2 weeks or so. Now, to get a hold of that, what you need to do is simply fill in a form, and they'll be passed around at the moment. And those forms are simply wanting your email address and your name, and we'll send them to you every 2 weeks or so. Now, if you don't like them after a couple of months, what are you going to do? You're going to unsubscribe, okay? Trust me, I am not going to email you. I am not going to give you a telephone call. I'm not going to offer you steak knives. You're getting nothing. You're out of the system. But the point is, do I read every one of them? No, but I read the ones that are going to be useful for me in an evangelical model. What do I mean by that? I mean that if something is in the newspapers, NASA says they found Earth 2, Kepler 2, we'll tell you very shortly, because we have people in NASA who are connected with CMI, we'll tell you the truth of all that. That's not happening because the planet is too close to the sun. It is burning, it's on fire, everything else. We'll tell you that. And so that allows you then, when somebody says to you in public, oh, NASA says this, you can say, let's catch up for a coffee. I've got a paper, only little, one and a half pages type things. I've got one written by a top scientist who says no. You sit down, they say, well, where did you get that from? Then you tell them that there are many Christian scientists. Opens a door, plants a seed. You see what I'm saying? That's why it's valuable. But if in the end you don't like him, you just unsubscribe. So, while you're filling those out, let me just give you a bit of background here. I was trained, obviously as a non-Christian, raised as a non-Christian. I was taught that evolution is the answer to understanding those landscapes out there, those hills, those floods, those fossil remnants. It's all about evolution. The things have occurred steadily over time, millions of years. And I accepted that because that's what you're taught. And today we go one step further. It's now taught in high schools, it's now taught in primary schools. I only got it taught to me in university. But I accepted that, and that's what I was doing, travelling the world, teaching that wherever I went, whichever university I was working for at the time, in whichever country I was in. But I was, in a sense, blessed before I went by two professors here in Australia who said to me, Ron, understand what science is. Because the media will treat science as factual. It will treat it almost as the truth. Even the government will look at it this way, that it's the truth. How many times when the government gets into trouble, whichever government is, and it gets into trouble, and it doesn't know how to answer it, what does it say? But the scientists have said. Bow to the scientists. It's become the new religion. But it's not, if we look at science, The left-hand side is what the media present. It's experimental. You can run an experiment, you can do chemistry, you can do physics. And if I give you a chemistry experiment and give you exactly the same equipment, chemicals, processes, times, and you follow exactly the steps I've given you, will you get the same answer as I did? Yes, you will. If you're going to say no, then we need to speak outside afterwards. I want to talk about your laboratory techniques. They're not that good. But the majority of science does not sit there. Cross out that word historical and put the word interpretational. I prefer interpretational. What does it mean? It means whether you're in biology, the bulk of biology, geology, geophysics, geomorphology, astrophysics, we can't do these experiments. I can't create a black hole and test it. Likewise, I was not there when the rocks were made. There's one rock over there and there's one rock over there. How do I link them together? Well, I wasn't there when it happened. I can do some measurements on it, but I can't rebuild it. So what do I have to do? I have to interpret. I have to connect the two together in my brain, and that's affected by my education, it's affected by my belief system, it's affected by my cultural background. Does it make sense? And so, just to prove to you, it was an interesting little experiment I did, not even intending to do this. I gave 5 underground images, one underground image, one of those, they blow up some explosives and you get a big reflection coming underground. I couldn't understand it, so I gave it to 5 seismologists who were extremely good and talented. I thought they'll work out what it means, all this that is underground us at the moment. Guess how many interpretations I got back? No, I got 7. 2 of them have struggling, with their identity and, schizophrenia, whatever. The point is, we can all see the same data, but we'll come up with a different interpretation. You see what I'm saying? And therein lies the challenge to all of us. And because we're talking fossils today, I'm going to give you one little test, because this to me is so important. I want you to understand that when you leave here and when you go and read something in a newspaper or watch something in the media or look on social media and all the rest, if somebody says something is the truth scientifically, I want you to ask the question, were you there when it was created? Can you duplicate that? Can you replicate that? If you cannot, then it is not the truth. It is a simple interpretation. Does that make sense? Just to drive the message home, to show you how universities work, I'm going to give you $500,000, imagine that, to go to South Africa and find me some dinosaur fossils. And you come back and you say you found one dinosaur fossil over there of a certain weight, size, shape, density, colour, all that sort of stuff, and another one over there. Now you're all going to get involved in this little experiment of mine. Yeah, you're getting worried, aren't you? I can see the looks on your faces. You come back from South Africa having found those 2. Put your hand up now if you're going to come back and tell me they are 2 pieces of fossil dinosaurs from the same species of dinosaur. Put your hand up. Anyone doing that? Nobody. Okay. Well, I'm disappointed. Okay. Put your hand up if you're going to come back and tell me they are definitely not the same species of dinosaur. Definitely not. 1, 2, 2 down the back there. Wonderful. Love your response. I tell you what, since there's 3 of us, we're going to write a couple of papers here. I want my name first, because I gave you the $500,000, okay, to go. I want my name first on that paper as the senior author. We're going to publish multiple papers. Since you come back with that interpretation and we were publishing it, I want to make sure you get a little bit of promotion, perhaps some extra money, some research monies and so on. You're all looking at me strange. Here's the question you didn't expect me to ask. Put your hand up if you have not yet put your hand up. Come on, put your hand up if you've not, and look around. The bulk of you. In other words, I gave you $500,000 as a scientist. You went to South Africa, you found 2 dinosaur fossils, and you came back and you stood before me and you went, I don't know. Guess what happens to you? You are terminated. You are finished. You are. We can laugh, but that's what's going to happen to you. You will come back with an interpretation or you're out of here, because we just wasted $500,000. Now, which would if somebody had said they were the same, let's just say somebody had said they were the same, and another group said they were not, which one was right? No idea. Because we were not there. We didn't see whether they were part of this one dinosaur. We made an interpretation. And if you told me they belong to the same one, I'm happy with that interpretation because it'll get us a new paper. And we'll write it. And because I'm senior editor, I'm going to name that dinosaur after me. Because that's what you do. You can do that. Isn't that wonderful? And if you'd come back and said they're not, I would have said that's a great answer. Let's write a paper saying they're not. Let's get some more research money and keep research. You see what I'm saying? Universities operate like that, ladies and gentlemen. You will be terminated. Simple story. So, as I travel the world looking at landscapes, I began to see many different landscapes and floods and fossils, but I learnt that unless I could see them being formed or had seen them being created over time, then anything I thought about them was an interpretation. It's not the truth. One site I went to, or not one site, was 7 or 9 different sites of the same feature. I won't even talk about the feature. There was a particular landscape feature in 7 or 9 different places around the world. Each one was studied by a different scientist. Each one came up with a different interpretation. But by looking at the pattern, as I travelled the world, I saw a different interpretation, an interpretation they did not see. Isn't that interesting? Because I'm now looking at a pattern analysis. Anyhow, let's move on to that. I just want you to be aware of that science is not the truth. It's not the foundation of it. It is a topic that is wonderful. I love it, but it's changing every day. And the interpretations change every day. So, fossil formation. Got a couple of happy little fossil pictures here for you. There's a little fossil. Let's talk about what is the key element of fossil formation. So I want you to really pay attention to the creature's emotions during this whole period of being fossilised. Here the creature being a fish. Why did I choose a fish? Because well over 97 or 99% of all fossils are marine. Did you know that? Not dinosaurs, not mammals, they're marine. So I chose a marine. There's a happy little fish swimming in some good water until that word that I used earlier comes along. It's called sediment. And what happens? It's panicking now, that poor fish. It's changing the turbidity, the nutrient content, everything. And so what happens? It can be buried under lots of sediment. Yes? That's what every website says. And I agree. Lots of sediment is needed to bury. Why? Because we need to put pressure, we need to put weight, whatever you want to call it. We need to actually put that heaviness on the organism to create a fossil. And it's unhappy, of course. But the moment it becomes a fossil, it's now happy again. It's happy now because now some sort of paleontologist or a person who uncovers this fossil will give it a new name. So it's going to get a new name now, and also you will interpret it. So you might look at that now. Some of you are going to say, that's a fish. Correct? But I could argue, that's not a fish. Or it is a fish. But see those two things coming out? You say they are fins. Suppose I said to you, I don't believe they're fins. I believe they are the first claws of the first fish that climbed out onto the land. And if you think I'm joking, go and read some academic journals. That's an interpretation. You see what I'm saying? But let's just say that fish was discovered here because I hear you're doing renovations. You're out there doing things. You're digging up the yard and so on. So suppose your pastor was out there in the last few days digging around and lo and behold turned over a fish. We would honour your pastor and give him recognition for this great work, and we would name it Jordadia francatosa. You like that? Yeah. Sort of cool, isn't it, to have something named after you? And so the fish is happy, it's got a new identity, new interpretation, and so on. Okay, what does it tell us? Everyone agrees. To create that fossil, you need rapid burial and constant burial. In other words, it's got to be fast, because if it's not fast, what happens to a fish if it doesn't immediately get buried? If it dies, what happens to it? Bloats and floats, doesn't it? We had tens of thousands in the Murray-Darling do that. Did they become fossils? No, because they were predated, they were eaten, they rotted, they decomposed, all of that. So we need a lot of sediment and we need it to be keeping coming. And we look at all that in that image and you go, wow, there's a lot of sediment coming. The problem we have is we need rapid and deep sedimentation. But after 50 to 70 years of mapping this planet, every aspect of the planet, every location on the planet, no matter where you want to go, Arctic, tropical, land, sea, guess what? We nowhere on this planet see rapid and deep burial in sediment. Nowhere. Now, I'm not talking of papers I've done or research I've done. I'm talking about thousands, tens of thousands of papers that are published in academic journals and literature from all around the world. We do not have enough sediment today to create a single fossil. You say, well, that can't be right. Well, the paleontologists have sought to find fossils being created, and guess how many they found? None. So something's gone wrong, hasn't it? If the past is meant to be a slow, same processes of today, then why aren't fossils being created today? Why can we not find any outside of, say, a laboratory or a mine site where we're creating it? Something's gone wrong with this interpretation when we look at that. Let's go back now to the question. When we look at the sediment, we go, is there a lot of sediment or not? Because our immediate interpretation of that would be, wow, that's a lot of sediment. If I took the concentration of that, which I would do many, many times, thousands of, take some water with the sediment, filter the sediment out, I would find that the concentration of sediment is high. But here's your problem. Does all of that sediment from that construction site go down to one spot and bury a fish metres deep? It actually doesn't. It spreads itself out over a large area, quite thinly. I'm going to show you the stats that we have from all around the world. Here we are in the Cook Islands, Takatuma Lagoon. And the Cook Island government was worried about this red look. There's their lagoon, it's a touristy place. They thought this red sediment is going to damage this particular lagoon, kill the coral. And so I was approached because now all around the world, I had studied all this, I'd come back to Australia, I was now top of the ranks, and they said, would you come to the Cook Islands and work on this problem? And I, what, you need me to come over there for a week or so, or 2 weeks to swim around Takatuma Lagoon? They went, yeah. I said, we could increase that length of time. As a scientist, I think I need more time, to swim around Takatuma Lagoon and have a beer down on the jetty, all of that. They said, okay, come on down. And of course, I found that is completely, has no impact whatsoever. It's red clay. It looks dramatic, but it's not. That red clay would settle on top of the coral when it came down from a construction site. The very next tide would wash it off. And so I was praised by the Cook Island government because I said, all you need is a few hay bales. That's all you need. Just get some bales of hay and vegetation and stop it. And they went, wow, thank you so much. Paid an academic to tell them to use hay bales on a construction site. But I was fully trained in that. I had all those certificates as well. What happened to the scientists who said the Great Barrier Reef was not being destroyed by sediment? He was terminated, wasn't he? Why? Because the university was making an incredible amount of money by claiming it was being damaged. He went to court. They found him absolutely innocent and he had to be reappointed because he was correct. What did the university do then? Sacked him again. Isn't that incredible? Because it's all about a paradigm, a way of thinking. Now, the Great Barrier Reef, by the way, today is the best it's ever been since we've been monitoring. This whole story is wrong. But the universities will terminate you if you do not accept this evolutionary and to some extent environmental programs that they talk about. So, let's have a look. I'm going to throw up a lot of fascinating images. Don't try and understand them. I'm just being a scientist trying to impress you. That is a map of the ocean floor where we have mapped the rate of sedimentation coming on the ocean floor. Now remember, most fossils are marine, are they not? Good. The figures on the right tell us that the deepest sediment we've ever found after decades of monitoring is the red, the dark, dark red, and it comes to, by estimation, 5 centimetres in 1,000 years. Oh, doesn't that get you excited? 5 centimetres is the biggest recorded. Are you kidding me? 5 centimetres, I cannot fossilise a cockroach on 5 centimetres in 1,000 years, because the cockroach is not going to lie there for 1,000 years waiting for 5 centimetres of sediment to come on top of it. It's going to decompose or rot or be washed away. So there's a huge problem. How come the majority of fossils are marine, yet today the maximum sediment you'll ever get is 5 centimetres in 1,000 years? You can't even show that between a finger and a thumb. You cannot even show what it is annually per year. You can't even do that. So as I began to question this as I was travelling the world with my fellow scientists, they said, come closer to shore, Ron. Now this is a Landsat image. It's false coloured and all the rest. Don't try to understand it so much. The deep blue on the far right is the deep ocean. On the left, all that bumpy stuff is the landscape around Rockhampton. And you've got the Fitzroy River coming out of Keppel Bay there. And the colours there sort of reflect the rate of sedimentation. Now this is not the figure for the Fitzroy and the Keppel Bay. These are figures from around the world that the range of sediment deposited on our continental shelf in the shallows offshore goes from 150 to 400 millimetres per 1,000 years. Oh, wow. And the average is 300. So I can get 0.3 millimetres of sediment per year. Does that excite you? Can I fossilise a cockroach with that? No, I can't. So my friend said, we'll come closer to shore again, Ron. So let's go into the mangrovey area and look at sedimentation rates there. Thousands of studies have been done on this. What do we find? The average rate, 3.6 millimetres per year. Wow, now I'm starting to get excited. 3.6 millimetres. It's still not enough. You need metres. And I'll show you some of that. Doesn't work. They said, well, come closer. What about floodplains? That's where we find dinosaur bones, in flood sediments, floodplains. Well, from around the world, those figures on the right are just some figures just I've pulled out of different places around the world. The 3.2 in the middle there, 3.2 centimetres, was an area that was covered in 3.2 centimetres as a result of a 100-year flood in Fiji. Wow. And the area that it covered is a bit bigger than this church. Wow. How do I get trillions of fossils if I'm going to cover it to 3.2 centimetres? And it occurred, yes, once. Is it still enough to fossilise a cockroach? The answer is still no. Anything will just dig that up or bury it, or erosion will take care of it. The largest figure found so far of a larger area was found by me in Macquarie Rivulet in New South Wales, where it was 10 centimetres from a much larger flood. The flood we sort of estimate would have been somewhere around a 250-year recurrence interval, at once every 250 years type frequency we talk about. We got 10 centimetres. Thailand got about 8 centimetres in another flood, which they were hoping to beat my record with. But I am absolutely now very proud, as I travel around Australia and around the world, to be able to declare that New South Wales is the dirtiest state on the planet. Anybody else here from New South Wales? Yep, I am too. I have that right to say that. The point being there, it's not good enough. So my friend said to me, Ron, what about them catastrophes, tsunamis? Well, guess what? We have looked at a tsunami. I didn't go in there, but other geomorphologists did, who measure sedimentation rates and erosion rates. And in this biggest tsunami ever recorded, which hit Indonesia and killed thousands, tens of thousands of people and smashed everything apart, what did we get? Whoa, 10 centimetres. That's the average. It was around about between 6 and 12. And you go, but no, that can't be right. The houses are gone. The people are gone. But the trees are still standing there. And right down the bottom there, if it shows up, not down there, there are people. There's people there. That brown is grass with a little bit of sediment on it, still standing up. It'll be washed away in the next rainfall. Why is it only 10 centimetres? It's a massive tsunami. Because we automatically think of what Hollywood says a tsunami is. Something that's gigantic, forming offshore and coming on and smashing it all. But what do boats do when they know there's a tsunami? If you've got a boat and there's a tsunami coming, what do? You go offshore. The wave's not there. It's not there. It's an energy wave as it comes in, not a physical wave. It's an energy wave. Only when it shallows on the beach shore and causes the energy wavelength to alter does it begin to form a physical wave. So only as it reaches the shore does it form a physical wave and go boom. Now, I had the privilege of witnessing one tsunami in the Cook Islands. I loved it because I was a bit panicky, but the Cook Island, it was the New Zealand ministry actually rang me up and said, Ron, we're heading all down to the harbour at Rarotonga. Come with us, we're going to watch a tsunami come in. I thought, are you people mad? I went down there. I thought, okay, if we're all going to die, I'll go down there with you all. So I went down there, and then we spotted it coming in, and everybody cheered, woo, 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 here comes a tsunami. It was that big. And then it hit me, as an earth scientist. Of course it's only that big. Because the Cook Islands is built on a coral atoll. In other words, deep ocean comes straight up like that, and then you've got your land. There is no time for that energy to be formed into a wave. The energy is dissipated, smashed against the rock wall, so to speak, the coral atoll, whatever it is, and dissipated. All that happened was a little 10-centimetre thing right below the top. That's it. If you are living with a deep ocean next to you, you will never have a tsunami. It can't happen. I thought, how cool is that? You know, I need to go and live in the Cook Islands. That's really cool. Anyhow, all of that led me to one problem. There's a Morrison formation of sediment, occupies 1.5 million square kilometres of North America, hundreds of metres deep, kilometres in places, of sediment riddled with trillions of fossils, trillions. How and what sort of flood would lay down a 1.5 million square kilometre sedimentary layers, because they're lovely layers that follow on top of each other, you know, lovely layers that go on and on, 1.5 million square kilometres, when I'm telling you that the best we've seen is 10 centimetres in a place as big as this church over the last 50, 70 years. How does that happen? That is not a local flood. That is not a regional flood. It's not even a continental flood. So I began to argue that has to be a global flood to create that much sediment. The earth has to be torn apart, unlike even a tsunami. And that's me thinking academically, as a scientist. A little bit of background there to some of the other work that's being done at the moment on fossils before we start to wrap it up. A study was done of crocodiles at the University of Queensland, where they buried a couple of young ones. They killed them, of course, first, put them under 20 centimetres of sediment, and guess what happened? Bloated and floated. 20 centimetres was not good enough, yet we don't see 20 centimetres anywhere around the world. So how do you create a juvenile crocodile? How could that have happened? Well, because I now work for Creation Ministries, I actually wrote an article up for you on that, and that's published in one of our magazines, which is incredible. Every magazine has all these different things, whether it's landscapes, plants, those sort of things. So I wrote an article there. That was one of my first articles in the magazine. Was it easy? No. You know why? I was used to writing for academics. I could publish anything in a top journal. But the day I submitted my first paper, which was one of these papers, to Creation Ministries, it was rejected 4 times. I was stunned. Why? Because they said, you've got to write it for the people, that everybody understands it. High school kids must be able to understand this. I went, okay, right. I'll write for them, you know, not for us, you know, sort of thing, filled with pride and arrogance. Okay, fine. And then they said, but is it equally scripturally correct, every element in it? I had to go back and absolutely do all of this. I was, oh, okay. But I loved it because it taught me how to write differently to get it across to you. So I wrote that. I did the analysis of that particular experiment. You want to know a lot more about that experiment on that crocodiles and all the rest, then read that article in there. or subscribe to the magazine, there's another great article, Fossils in a Day. They finally worked out how to create fossils in a day. For 20 years or so, they'd been putting lizard parts between two concrete blocks and squeezing it tightly overnight, opening it the next day, and they were disappointed they'd find a liquid, mushy substance. And they go, what's gone wrong? Then they finally realised they needed to be listening to us, geomorphologists, who said the fossils are found in flood sediments, a type of sediment, a flood sediment that's brought with a flood. And they went, oh, okay. So what they did was they put lizard parts in flood sediments, squeezed it overnight, opened it up, and lo and behold, they had mimicked fossil formation by applying incredible pressure over a lizard in a flood sediment. Well, that raises a lot of questions. It helps us a lot. What happened? Let me ask you a question. What are you made of mostly? Water. Water inhibits. It stops the process or retards the process of fossilization. You have to get the water out, when the blood and all the other liquids. So in other words, we need to be squeezed tightly, yes, to get it out of us fast. It can't sit there for months. We'll just decompose, we rot. That's the end of the story. And so what has to happen is we have to do it. But what will absorb the water in you? The answer is the sediment. The sediment, flood sediment, readily absorbs water or liquids. So by finding all these fossils in flood sediments, buried deep, the weight forces the liquids out of your body into the surrounding sediment, and you become fossilised. Isn't that fantastic? That helped us a lot. So that's a hard article. So what I had to do, I was asked then to rewrite that article and tell you all about it. So it's published in another one of our magazines. And I published it there, and that certainly had an impact, that paper, because now we start to understand how a fossil is formed. You have to be buried deep, really deep. We're not talking metres anymore, we're talking tens if not hundreds of metres are needed of sediment. And so there's an article there in that Creation magazine as well. Finally, we did discover also, another scientist did, Mary Schweitzer, that dinosaurs, when you cut them in half, the fossilised bones, you will actually find tissues that can still be stretched and put back into position. You'll find red blood cells. So when you cut a bone in half, you will find all of these basically, they're not living anymore, but previously living tissues. How is that possible, ladies and gentlemen? Dinosaurs are meant to be 65 million years ago. How would you find a tissue in a dinosaur bone that can still be stretched and put back into position? It's impossible. So, to challenge her, various societies like the Royal Society of London said she must have got it wrong. We're going to be absolutely, almost sacrosanct, or you're going to be. This is terrible. We're going to have to cut up another dinosaur just to prove you wrong. But as they cut up dinosaur pieces all around the world, guess what they found? The red tissues, collagen, red blood cells, all those sort of things. Will they accept then that the fossils are not 65 million years old? Of course not. They still wonder how red blood cells could survive 65 million years. Come on, this is sci-fi beyond your imagination. I love Stargate and Doctor Who and all the rest, but that's going way beyond those imaginative people as well. That's been written up again in a magazine, and I haven't shown you a picture of that because I didn't write it. I'm just being a little bit, if I didn't write it, you're not seeing it. Yeah. But anyhow, focal points. What did I discover? The sediment supply rate needed to create fossils is insufficient today. That's number one, from all those studies done around the world. And secondly, fossils were not formed millions of years ago. Did that change me? Absolutely. I came to a scientific conclusion, not a belief system, not my faith system, that a global flood had occurred. Isn't that incredible that a scientist can do that? So, going back to the original diagram, what did I believe in now? I believe that sediments and landscapes, because I had studied rates, distribution, volume, frequency, and fossils, abundance, sorting, role, all these big words. The point being, they all pointed to the Bible. That something created all these fossils in a massive catastrophic event that tore the planet apart, and the sediments they were buried in were flood sediments, not beach sediments, not landslide sediments. They're buried in flood sediments. So I began to think, the Bible must be correct. Did I willingly give my life to Christ? No. That was not going to happen. But an argument began at university between myself and a lady with a biological background and training, and she was managing research stations and all these sorts of things. And she felt a little bit sorry for me because when I said God must exist, it can be misinterpreted as though you're a Christian. And I wasn't. I just said God must exist. So essentially, I became agnostic. And so, in good favour, she tried to help me, because no tutor said that, no senior tutor, no lecturer, no senior lecturer, and yet here's a professor now back in Australia running research centres, working as an advisor for the federal and state governments, working for the, not even sure what it's called now, OECD, yeah, OECD. I was working for them on how to build better universities in Australia and all the rest of it. I was top boy, and yet I seemed to believe that God existed as a science professor. That's not really understood, is it? You don't hear about that. So she challenged me, and I didn't know how to answer things, so I said, go and read the book, which is the Bible, and she did, and she came back and asked me more difficult questions. Why did God kill so many people, perhaps? And I asked, well, what are you reading? And of course she started reading from the front, Genesis. Isn't that interesting? And I said, I don't think you meant to read there. I think you meant to go to them things called the Gospels or whatever they're called, Anyhow, she challenged me one day, said, take me to your church. Well, I went, huh? I put it off week after week, if not months. And eventually, okay, fine, take you to the church. We're going to a church. We walked into a church similar to this one. And we had a bit of a discussion, because she wasn't sure that it was a church. I mean, questions like, where's the organ? What's with the rock band on stage? You see, people who haven't been to Christ or seen to Christ or been to church, they look at it through the media. And she said, well, where's the stained glass windows or something? What's with that? Where's the wooden pews? What's with the nice seats? Anyhow, we sat down, listened. We don't remember a single thing about that message. But the pastor said, right, doing a call for Christ, close your eyes, lower your head, put your hand up. I'm being simple here because he went in a lot more than that. Put your hand up if you're going to give your life to Christ. Guess what she did as an atheist? She put her hand up. Isn't that incredible? She then had a bit of a look at me to see if I approved her, because she thought I was a Christian, and guess what she saw? My hand was up as well. Here's the point, ladies and gentlemen. An atheist dragged an agnostic into church. We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing as Christians? You know what I mean? How are we planting the seed? Right? Did we struggle with that communication for too long? No. About a year and a half later, I married her. She's sitting up the back there. And it changed our lives totally. Totally changed our lives. We no longer work at university. All sorts of things happened. But she came from an atheistic family. I came from an alcoholic family and a violent family. And so it was an interesting change for two of us to change dramatically and to have the family watch what we were doing. I want to close on the point, though, that the book of Genesis that brought my wife to Christ and that I prove was correct in scientific terminology is under challenge today like it's never been under challenge. Well, it actually has been under challenge since the beginning of time. Even when Paul and Peter were roaming, they speak of it. It is under challenge today by so many people. I'm not even going to talk about atheists and others. I'm going to mention so many Christians challenge the book of Genesis. And I struggle with that, having given my life to Christ. For example, did God really say that in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them, and rested on the 7th day? Did he really say that? Because you're going to get top pastors like this in England. Steve Chalk goes from different denomination to different denomination, speaking across England, saying the Bible is flawed. Creation and fall of Adam and Eve is not history, it's a myth. And he is popular across England. What about, did God really say, as I've said he did, I proved it. Behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Hence they became fossils, blah, blah, blah. Everything else that on earth shall die. That's what we say. That's what I say. But it's not what John Walton says, who's a professor of the Old Testament at Wheaton College in the USA. Fascinating. He wrote a book of how the entire story of the flood occurring is false. You'll find that in every Koorong bookstore. You'll find that in every Bible college. Trust me, I've had a look. And many churches will beam his material through to them through a live talk and so on. He says Adam and Eve weren't there. My question to anyone who says that to me is, then what's the purpose of Christ? If we didn't have Adam and Eve and they did not sin, why did Christ have to die a physical death? Doesn't make sense, does it? The very book of Genesis is the foundation of the Bible. And so it's important from a scholar's point of view, which I'm trying to share with you. As a scholar's point of view, creation matters because Genesis was important to the New Testament authors. In fact, every author of the New Testament will either refer directly to the book of Genesis or allude to or mention a part of the book of Genesis. Every author. Trust me. If you look at the book of Luke, which is historical, he refers to the book of Genesis 16 times. And yet it's meant to be historical. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. Hebrews and Romans. Romans is wrapping creation with salvation. Isn't that beautiful? Even the book of Jude. 4 times is Genesis mentioned. No author turned their back on that. So from a scholar's point of view, as I then unravel, well, is this true for me? I've seen it in a flood. Is the rest of it true? Yes, it is, because they do. But it's also very, very important to us from an evangelical point of view when we try to connect with people to understand the link between Christ and creation. You see, we live in a world today is the same world that Paul lived in. We are speaking to Gentiles today. We are speaking to people who have no knowledge of Christ. If you're under the age of 35, unless you're raised in a Christian family, you've never heard that word outside of a derogatory term. So, how did Peter address the Jews? He did it by referring back to Abrahamic and Davidic promises. Paul could not in the Greek community. He couldn't do it because they didn't have that understanding. So what did he do in a Gentile community? Read his work. It is wrapped in creation. And you will find evangelists now down on the streets, in the beaches, in the sunny coast where we come from, talking about creation because every young person wants to know about creation. That's the door opener. And that's what we're talking about. In the 21st century, we are in the same period as Paul is in. That's why I recommend creation materials and sharing that with others. Did Jesus refer to the book of Genesis? Absolutely. So if we challenge the book of Genesis, we challenge Jesus himself. He used it, for example, looking at Caesar's image. He could have easily said that coin belongs to Rome, give it back. But he didn't. He refers to the image of that and the image of you. That's a doctrinal statement. That's about us and who we belong to. Lots of scripture there on that. Did he talk about marriage and divorce? Yes. Absolutely he did. And that also comes back to Genesis 1:27. That's what he's referring to there. Did he talk about Sodom? Absolutely. In Capernaum, when they basically reject him, he walks out and makes the comment, which you can see there in Matthew 11. He says, had the people in Sodom seen the miracles that I could do and listened to the message I am giving, the outcome would have been very different for Sodom. But you people in Capernaum, and when I read that, I thought, oh, I wouldn't want to be in Capernaum. I'd rather be in Sodom. You know, the anger or whatever expression that Christ is expressing is very serious. In other words, Jesus is using the book of Genesis to refer to his current message. He also uses the book of Genesis to refer to his return. With Noah's flood, that the time of the living and so on, then will be similar to the time of the living when he returns. So in other words, Jesus accepted the book of Genesis was historical through all those examples, foundational from a doctrinal point of view as you work your way through the Bible. It's important and it's the truth. And every writer in the New Testament did the same too. Not one of them challenged it. They actually referred to genealogy, they referred to histology, they referred to all of those elements. They never once challenged it. So today, if we have Christians in our family, or even ourselves occasionally, just challenge the book of Genesis every now and then, we need to ask ourselves a question. Are we challenging Moses? Not really. Who are we challenging? We're challenging God, aren't we? We're challenging Christ. We're challenging God. So we need to be very, very cautious when we try to place interpretations, let's put it that way, on the book of Genesis. To come back to that. And so, I think that's basically it.